Mud, blood, the stink of oil and the rot of corpses rotting beneath unyielding sky. In the endless killing fields of the Imperium, where the Astra Militarum dig their trenches across worlds no cartograph will ever remember, survival is measured not in days, but in the number of breaths stolen from death. The trenches are not lines of defense, but pits of despair, filled with men and women whose names dissolved as quickly as the morning mist burned away by Promethean fire. They huddle against walls slick with filth, their ears forever ringing with the vox-grill shriek of commissars and the unending thunder of distant artillery. And in those shallow graves they call home, horror is not the charging orc or the silent necron, but the unseen rot of fear, hunger, and the slow erosion of humanity itself. If you wish to descend deeper into these shadows, to walk the mire and taste the ash where countless guardsmen have perished nameless beneath the Imperial Aquila, then stand with us now. Lend your voice, subscribe, share this tale so their forgotten cries may not vanish into the silence of history. The ground is never firm beneath a guardsman's boots. Each step sinks into the mire as if the earth itself conspires to drag him down into its wet black stomach. The trenches are shallow scars carved by exhausted hands, walls of mud that sweat foul water and reek of mold. Sandbags sag like bloated corpses, their seams spilling rotted soil, while wooden planks groan under the weight of men too tired to notice the difference between mud and blood anymore. The hollow earth, they call it, in muttered jokes that never sound like laughter. It is not a name born of defiance, but of resignation, a truth spoken quietly, because even the dirt here seems to listen. Night brings no mercy. The sky is a rotting shroud of smoke, clouds stitched with the angry flashes of distant fire. When shells fall, the horizon itself fractures, and the trenches tremble as if the planet is trying to shake them loose. In those moments, guardsmen dig their nails into the earth, clutching at the only thing they know will not abandon them. When the barrage fades, silence lingers like an unwelcome guest. No birds sing here, no insects stir. Only the slow drip of water through shattered sandbags breaks the quiet, and even that sound becomes unbearable when one realizes how it never stops. Hunger gnaws with a cruelty sharper than any bayonet. The rations taste of rusted tin and burnt grease, their texture soft as if chewed a dozen times before. Men dream of food the way others dream of lovers. Bread warm from the oven, meat not pulled from unidentifiable tins. In the mornings, stomachs growl louder than the heavy stubbers. Yet still they march, they man the las guns, they recite their prayers with cracked lips. For in the trenches, hunger is no enemy, it is a companion that never leaves. The smell is worse than the hunger. It is the reek of men who have not bathed in months, of oil that seeps from their weapons, of corpses buried hastily when the shelling permits. There is a sourness in the air, like milk left to curdle, mingled with the metallic tang of dried blood. It coats the tongue, clings to the nostrils, seeps into the very fabric of flak jackets and does not wash out. Some soldiers swear they can taste the rot even in their sleep, that dreams themselves have begun to stink. Sleep, when it comes, is a mercy laced with cruelty. Guardsmen collapse on the cold planks, helmet still strapped, boots still wet, lasgun clutched tight against their chest. The mind slips only briefly into darkness before being wrenched awake by the scream of shells, or the bark of orders shouted through a vox grill. Some wake not at all, claimed by exhaustion so total that they suffocate silently in the mud. And yet none speak of it. Death here is not a story to be told. It is a routine, no different than loading a clip or cleaning the grit from a last pack.
Comradeship is the only shield they possess against the slow hollowing, a shared joke whispered under the crash of artillery, A flask passed hand to hand, its contents bitter enough to burn the throat, yet sweet in its rarity. A photograph, frayed at the edges, shone under the dim glow of a guttering lamp. But comradeship is fragile, and the hollow earth devours even that. Each man learns not to ask about the one who fails to wake, not to mention the space left empty beside them. Bonds dissolve into silence, and silence becomes the only language that does not wound. Yet there are other whispers, ones that slip through the stillness when the guns fall quiet. Some claim to hear scratching in the walls, as though something alive tunnels parallel to the trenches. Others speak of shapes glimpsed in the fog, not xenos, not human, but shadows that sway like reeds before vanishing. The officers dismiss such talk as fatigue, madness born of sleeplessness. But the guardsmen know better. They know the hollow earth is listening. The mud shifts when no one moves. Planks creak when no one walks. Helmets left unattended are sometimes found filled with water, though no rain has fallen. The trench has moods, they whisper, like a living thing. It feeds when the shells come down and feasts when the night grows long. Some swear the earth drinks the blood spilled into it, growing stronger with every drop. Others, when no commissar is near, dare to suggest that the very ground is cursed, a graveyard that pulls men down, not because of battle, but because it craves their flesh. And still, they endure. Not for glory, not for the promise of medals or banners. They endure because the trench has become their entire world, and leaving it means stepping into a horizon that kills without thought or care. Here, at least, the mud feels familiar. Here, the unseen horror waits in the silence, but at least it is a silence they know. The night grows heavier, the fog thicker, and the whispers louder. A guardsman leans against the wall of the trench, listening to the earth breathe beneath him, and wonders if his heartbeat is truly his own anymore, or if the hollow earth has already claimed it. Dawn does not arrive here as it should. The sun never truly rises above the haze, and when light seeps into the trenches, it comes gray and sickly, filtered through smoke that has lingered for weeks. Men glance upward with hollow eyes, unable to recall the color of a clear sky. The air tastes of ash, bitter and dry, clinging to the throat like powdered bone. Voices rasp, coughs rattle through the ranks, and yet orders still arrive across Vox units crackling with static. Hold the line, dig deeper, prepare for another assault. The words change little, for every day bleeds into the next, and no command has ever promised an end. Work begins before hunger can slow them. Shovels pierce mud that refuses to yield, every thrust bringing with it a stench of decay. Sometimes bones emerge, yellowed and brittle, remnants of guardsmen buried hastily months ago, or perhaps years. No one asks which regiment they belong to. No one marks the spot. The bones are set aside, kicked into the wall, or quietly reburied underfoot. A trench is never built upon virgin earth. It is always layered atop the forgotten dead. Every step forward is a step into the graves of those who dug before.
Weapons corrode faster than they can be cleaned. Las-gun barrels are pitted with rust, their charge packs weakened by damp. Bayonets snap when thrust against sandbags, the steel brittle from cold and rain. Ammunition is rationed tightly, each clip passed down like a relic, each shot weighed against its worth. A man may hesitate to fire, not because of fear, but because he knows the next shot may be his last, until the quartermaster delivers more. And the quartermasters themselves are ghosts, their faces glimpsed only briefly when supplies arrive, then vanish again into the smoke. Every object becomes precious. A strip of cloth torn from a flak jacket is used to patch a boot. A broken mess tin is reshaped into a blade. Even candles, burned low, are treasured, their stubs hoarded as though they were gold. Guardsmen barter quietly, their trades conducted with eyes averted, for to show desire is dangerous. It is not Xenos or heretics they fear, but the desperation of their own comrades. A man starving will kill for a crust of bread. A man shivering will kill for a blanket. And when he does, the commissar's bolt pistol will end him, one more corpse fed into the earth. The commissar's shadow looms even here, though his boots rarely touch the mud. He patrols the trench lines like a wraith, his eyes as cold as the steel at his hip. Few dare meet his gaze, for those who do often find themselves summoned later, their absence explained away as cowardice purged for the Emperor's glory. Yet his presence is necessary, or so the officers say, for without fear of the commissar, the trench would devour its own faster than the enemy ever could. And so the guardsmen cling to ritual. Every morning begins with prayer, their voices ragged but steady, murmuring litanies that promise the Emperor's light will never fade. Some whisper the words mechanically, lips moving without conviction, while others clutch their aquilas with trembling hands as if belief itself were the only weapon left. The prayers echo down the trench, a broken chorus that rises above the stink of rot. Whether the Emperor hears them, no one can say, but the act of speaking is enough to hold the silence at bay for another day. When night returns, fear sharpens once more. Darkness crawls over the trench like a living thing, feeling every corner, swallowing every shadow. The lanterns burn low, their flames flickering in the damp, barely pushing back the void. Men huddled together, listening to the sounds they cannot name. Footsteps where no one walks, whispers where no one speaks, scratching that moves closer with each passing hour. Some plug their ears with mud, others clutch their lasguns, fingers trembling against triggers, praying that if something comes, it comes swiftly. But the hollow earth is patient. It does not need to strike. It waits. It seeps into their bones, gnaws at their thoughts, hollows out their will. And when the guardsmen finally break, when a scream shatters the silence, when a soldier claws at the mud as though something beneath it drags him down, the trench absorbs it without question. Another voice gone, another name erased. Yet still the line holds. The Emperor demands sacrifice, and the trenches supply it in endless measure. What is one more body in a sea already thick with corpses? What is one more scream beneath the thunder of artillery? The hollow earth swallows them all, and the war above rages on. There comes a moment in every guardsman's service when the trench ceases to feel like a place and begins to feel like a sentence. The days grind together until time itself becomes meaningless, marked only by the changing pitch of artillery and the distant thunder of armor rolling unseen through the haze. A man might count the weeks by notches carved into his lasgun's stock, but even those tally marks blur, each stroke indistinguishable from the last. In this timelessness, the hollow earth deepens its hold. Voices grow quieter as days stretch into oblivion. Guardsmen speak less, laugh less, until silence becomes the only language worth learning. Silence does not betray when rations are short. Silence does not call attention when fear trembles in a man's eyes. Silence, above all, cannot be punished by the commissar. And so the trench becomes a world of shadows, where men breathe and fight, but no longer live. They stare at the walls slick with moisture, at the sky that never changes, and wonder if they themselves have already died, their bodies still moving only because the mud refuses to let them rest. And yet, in this oppressive stillness, strange things occur. The whispers that had once been dismissed as fatigue now spread like contagion. Men claim to see faces in the mud, half-formed and gasping silently. Others speak of hearing their own names carried on the smoke, voices familiar but long dead. One soldier swore he saw the Imperial Aquila etched into the trench wall, glowing faintly before the mud swallowed it whole. He was executed by the commissar the next day, condemned for blasphemy, but the others did not forget. They glance more often at the walls now, wary of what might emerge. Superstition becomes as important as prayer. Soldiers spicked 3 times before lighting a lamp, lest the darkness cling to the flame. They refuse to step where fresh blood stains the planks, claiming the earth beneath will drag them down faster. Helmets are never left upside down, for they say it invites the hollow earth to drink from them. These rituals, irrational as they are, become lifelines, small acts of defiance against a world that devours men whole. Then comes the night of the still barrage. The guns fall silent for the first time in weeks, leaving the trench exposed in an unnatural quiet. The guardsmen stare at one another, unsure if the silence is mercy or omen. It stretches endlessly, broken only by the sound of their own breath. And then, faintly, comes the noise. Not the whistle of shells, not the thunder of distant armor, but something softer. A low hum rising from beneath their boots. The mud vibrates gently, as if something immense stirs deep within the ground. Men clutch their weapons, eyes wide, but there is nothing to fire at, nothing to see, only the hum pulsing in rhythm with their racing hearts. Some call it imagination. Others call it the Emperor's voice, but most say nothing, for they know instinctively that to name it is to give it power. They press their bodies against the trench walls, hoping the mud will protect them, even as they feel it tremble. The hum fades eventually, but the damage is done. Sleep becomes impossible. Every vibration of the earth, every distant echo is now a threat. The hollow earth has revealed itself not merely as grave, but as something alive. The next morning, work continues as if nothing had happened. Orders arrive, shovels dig, las guns are cleaned, and the endless machinery of war grinds on. But the men dig faster now, deeper, their eyes darting to the ground as though expecting it to open at any moment. They whisper more prayers, clutch their charms tighter, barter more desperately for scraps of food and light. And though no one speaks of it openly, all know the truth. The hollow earth is awake. By evening, the trench is once more filled with noise, artillery roaring, commissars shouting, lasguns cracking against unseen enemies in the mist. The routine of war returns, smothering the fear beneath layers of sound and smoke. Yet the memory of that hum lingers, an unspoken reminder that the greatest threat does not always charge from across no man's land. Sometimes it waits beneath one's feet, patient, hungry, eternal. The trench holds, as it always does. Men are buried, replaced, forgotten. The mud drinks its fill. The sky bleeds smoke, and the hollow earth continues its feast. Life in the trenches does not end with battle or victory, but with the quiet erosion of the human spirit, one breath at a time. And so, when the commissar strides past, barking orders to dig deeper and endure longer, the guardsmen obey, not because they believe, not because they hope, but because they know there is nowhere else to go. And in that obedience, the trench wins again. The lasgun was never meant to last forever. Even in the finest manufactorums of the Imperium, where servitors chant prayers over each assembly line and tech priests anoint every charge pack with sacred oils, the lasgun is still a tool of war, and all tools eventually break.
In the trenches, the breaking comes faster. Damp seeps into every seam, rain sluices through every grip, and the earth itself works against the steel. A weapon that once sang with the promise of the Emperor's wrath now stutters when the trigger is pulled, coughing light instead of roaring it. A soldier cleans his rifle daily, rubbing the barrel until his fingers split, whispering litanies learned from the catechisms of maintenance. But no prayer can stop the slow rust. No ritual can halt the fraying of wires inside the grip. Lasguns fail as men fail, bodies and steel rotting together in the mire. And when a weapon dies in the hands of a guardsman, the man himself is often buried with it. Not out of ceremony, but because there is no time to separate flesh from iron. The same fate befalls armor. Flak jackets that once gleamed beneath parades are now stained and sodden, their fibers stiffened by dried blood. Helmets dent from the smallest impacts, their paint scoured away by endless rain. A guardsman might run his hands along the ridges of his gear and feel not protection, but the weight of inevitable collapse. The war grinds down not only bone but iron, until both are indistinguishable heaps of wreckage scattered across the trench floor. Servitors fare no better. Their augmetics rust, their vox grills clog with mud, and their sacred directives falter when water seeps into their processors. At night, their stuttering voices echo like broken hymns, caught between command and malfunction. Once they were instruments of precision, tireless and exact, but here they are reduced to twitching figures whose tools slip from their fingers, whose optic lenses flicker with static. The men pretend not to notice. To acknowledge the decay of servitors is to acknowledge their own reflection in steel. Flesh and machine both erode under the same sky. Food, too, carries the taste of rust. Rations stored in battered tins corrode at the edges, their contents sour and metallic. Teeth rot, stomachs rebel, but hunger makes all things edible. In time, even the sensation of disgust fades, dulled by repetition. A guardsman learns not to savor, not to expect, but to consume quickly before another shell rips his rations from his hands. The body reflects the same corrosion. Coughs become constant companions. Skin breaks into sores where fabric rubs too long. Eyes burn from the smoke of 1,000 promethium flames. Fingers blister from frost in the morning and scald in the evening when forced to grip overheated barrels. The human form becomes less a soldier and more an extension of the trench itself, a moving piece of mud and blood shaped vaguely like a man. When one collapses, dead or near enough, the difference hardly matters. The line consumes him, his gear redistributed, his name already dissolving in the static of the vox. In this collapse, soldiers cling to fragments. A well-oiled knife passed down through regiments becomes a talisman. A lasgun that still fires true is regarded as holy. A pair of boots without holes may be worn until they fuse to the skin, leather and flesh indistinguishable. These relics are not issued by quartermasters, but earned by chance, scavenged from the dead or stolen from the dying. And each time a man clutches one, he feels a whisper of strength, a reminder that not everything succumbs to decay at once.
Yet the decay cannot be halted. The trench is a furnace where steel melts and men are reduced to cinders. The line between the two blurs until comrades joke, though without smiles, that soon the tech priests will begin repairing guardsmen as if they were weapons, bolting plates to their ribs and wiring batteries into their hearts. Some whisper that this already happens on distant worlds, that flesh and machine are one and the same beneath the Emperor's gaze. Whether rumor or truth, it spreads quickly, for it feels inevitable. And still, the war machine demands more. Every day, crates of weapons arrive, stamped with the Imperial Aquila, blessed with incense and prayer. And every day those weapons rust, misfire, or are buried with their wielders. Steel is no more eternal than bone, and in the hollow earth, both are consumed alike. The soldiers see it, they live it, and though they do not dare speak it aloud, they know the Emperor demands not just their flesh, but their steel as well. The machine spirit is a fragile thing in the trenches. Tech priests say each lasgun, each vox unit, each battered chimera possesses one, a spark of divinity bound within iron and circuitry. But here, in the damp hollow where smoke chokes even prayer, those spirits falter. Vox units crackle with half-words, voices dissolving into shrieks of static. A simple command, hold the line, ready bayonets, prepare barrage, becomes an indecipherable storm of sound, forcing guardsmen to rely on instinct and guesswork. The machine spirit does not abandon them willingly, yet the trench corrodes faith as quickly as it corrodes steel. When a vox suddenly falls silent, the silence spreads further than any order ever could. Soldiers glance at one another with wide eyes, their hands tightening around grips slick with sweat and mud. For they know that a broken vox is more than an inconvenience, it is a severed lifeline. In that silence, they are alone, cut off from the wider Imperium, from officers who might still see strategy in the endless mire. Alone, the trench becomes a coffin without walls, and every man inside feels the lid closing.
Vehicles fare no better. Once, on this very front, the tracks of Lehman Russ battle tanks roared like thunder, their heavy cannons promising salvation with every shuddering shot. Now their carcasses line the no-man's land, rusted shells half buried in the mud. Some serve as cover, their guns snapped in half like broken bones, their hatches gaping open to reveal skeletons of crews still strapped to their seats. Other wrecks sink steadily into the mire, swallowed whole, leaving only the tips of their barrels poking from the earth like grave markers. The men do not mourn them. They step over twisted treads and shattered armor as they would any other corpse. Flesh or steel, the end is the same. And still, the cycle repeats. Supplies arrive by the week, a trickle compared to the flood of need. New lasguns, fresh helmets, crates of ammunition. The guardsmen accept them without ceremony, though each knows how quickly the gifts will rot. Already the paint chips as the crates are pried open. Already the damp seeps into the metal. They do not think of these weapons as replacements, but as sacrifices, offerings meant to hold decay at bay for a little longer. A day, a battle, perhaps only an hour. That is all the Imperium promises them. What the Imperium does not replace are the men themselves. Wounds fester, untreated, until they rot into gangrene. Fingers lost to frostbite are wrapped in cloth and ignored, for Medicae supplies are reserved for those still able to fire. The line must be held, no matter how many are broken in its defense. And so soldiers march on with ribs fractured, with lungs blackened by smoke, with eyes filmed by disease. Each step is agony, but to fall is to feed the hollow earth. In this place, pain is no excuse. Pain is proof one is still alive. Some soldiers look upon their own ruined bodies and find a kind of dark kinship with their weapons. A man coughs up blood and spits it onto the mud, then watches his lasgun spark and hiss with failing charge. Both are dying together. Both are remnants of the Emperor's will expiring slowly in the muck. And in that reflection, he feels less alone. For in the end, the flesh is no more sacred than the steel. Both are expendable. Both are fuel. There are whispers of Skitarii marching on other fronts, soldiers whose flesh has already been claimed by the Forge Worlds, their limbs replaced with augmetics immune to rust and rot. To the guardsmen, these tales sound less like envy and more like prophecy. They imagine themselves hollowed out, fitted with wires and pistons, their frail humanity stripped away until only the function remains. The thought no longer terrifies them, it comforts. For if decay is inevitable, then perhaps becoming steel is the only escape from rot. But for now, they remain what they are, half-broken men clutching half-broken weapons, praying to machine spirits that cough in their hands and to an emperor who demands sacrifice without end. Their bodies stiffen in the cold, their rifles jam in the damp, and still they march when commanded, still they dig, still they fire into fog that swallows every bolt of light. Flesh and steel rotting together, feeding the hollow earth as surely as blood feeds its soil. And the war machine grinds on, indifferent to whether its cogs are made of bone or iron. The trench does not distinguish between man and weapon when it consumes. Both sink into the mire together, indistinguishable after a day, a week, a month. Rust claims iron as rot claims flesh, and when enough time passes, it is impossible to tell whether a shape buried in the mud was once a guardsman or once a las cannon. The hollow earth has no favorites. It devours all. There are moments when the two become one before the ground even claims them. A guardsman whose flak vest has stiffened with dried blood is hauled from the mud by comrades, only for his body to crack apart where cloth has fused to skin. Another soldier, deft from the ringing of artillery, presses his ear to the receiver of a broken Vox unit, whispering words that will never reach any officer. For him, the machine is no longer tool, but companion. And when he dies in the night, fingers still wrapped around the cold metal, no one dares to take it from him. It is his relic, his grave gift. On rare days, the trench exhales something back. A collapse in the wall exposes layers of corpses intermingled with twisted rifles, helmets, bayonets. The soldiers stare at the grotesque mixture, bone threaded through weapon grips, steel welded to rib cages by fire. The sight is both horrifying and familiar. They bury it quickly, not from pity, but from dread. To linger is to see themselves reflected in the debris, to know that they too will soon be indistinguishable from the wreckage of war. Even their blood takes on the qualities of corrosion. Cuts fester instantly, the wounds not red but brown, skin peeling like tarnished metal. A man who loses a finger wraps it in cloth and presses it to his belt like a spare part, muttering half prayers, half mechanical litanies, as though the flesh itself might be reforged. But the Imperium does not mend its cogs, it replaces them. A guardsman's body is not a sacred relic, but an expendable component. When it breaks, it is discarded, and the line marches on. The commissariat ensures this truth is never forgotten. At night, when lamps gutter and the fog thickens, soldiers whisper not only of the hollow earth, but of the man who walks above it with bolt pistol gleaming. They know he watches, even when unseen. They know that for all their suffering, there is no greater sin than hesitation. A misfiring weapon can be forgiven. A rotting body can still be carried forward, but a faltering spirit cannot. That earns the commissar's bullet. Flesh and steel may rot, but faith cannot. And if it does, the commissar restores the balance with a single shot. It is this knowledge that binds soldiers tighter to their weapons, even when those weapons betray them. They cradle las guns that cough instead of roar, clutch knives that snap in the mud, because to let them fall is to risk being seen as faithless. A man with a broken las gun still points it toward the fog when ordered, finger trembling on the useless trigger. He knows the enemy is not always across no man's land. Sometimes it stands directly behind him, wrapped in a greatcoat, watching. And so the guardsmen endure, dragging their failing bodies alongside failing steel. They patch rifles with scraps of cloth. They sharpen bayonets against stone until sparks fly. They whisper hymns into jammed barrels as if the sound alone might cleanse them. Each act is both ritual and defiance, though neither guarantees survival. In the end, flesh and steel both collapse. The line does not endure because of their strength, but because of their willingness to dissolve together. The trench absorbs these fragments without pause. A lasgun rusts into dust beside the bones of the man who fired it. Helmets cave in, flak jackets crumble, servitors lie twisted with their augmetics still sparking faintly. All of it is buried beneath layers of new mud, new corpses, new wreckage. And as the soldiers dig deeper, they dig into this endless graveyard, breathing the dust of both their forebears and their tools. The hollow earth does not care which is flesh, which is steel. Both are the same to it: sustenance, silence, ruin. And somewhere above, a commissar's boots strike the planks, heavy and certain, reminding every man in the trench that rot is not the only fate waiting for them. Death by decay is slow. Death by bolt pistol is instant. Between the two, there is no choice at all. The trench may hollow a man, strip him to bone and mud, but it is the commissar who ensures that hollowed shell continues to fight. His presence is a weight heavier than any lasgun, a shadow longer than the barrels of the heavy stubbers. When he walks the planks, cloak dragging in the filth, conversations die. Helmets dip lower. Even the trench itself seems to stiffen, its rotten boards creaking less under his stride.
The guardsmen do not know his name, not truly. To them he is only the commissar, as eternal and unchanging as the mud. His eyes are cold, rimmed with the steel certainty of one who has already judged every man around him guilty until proven loyal. His bolt pistol gleams despite the damp, cared for with a reverence no soldier could muster for his own failing rifle. Men whisper that the pistol's machine spirit is fed not with oil, but with blood, that its hungry barrel has claimed more guardsmen than Xenos. Whether rumor or truth, no one doubts its power. He speaks rarely, and when he does, his words are clipped, hard, without excess. Orders, judgments, prayers, all delivered with the same tone, as though each is interchangeable. To the commissar, they are. A command is a judgment is a prayer. All are the emperor's will. The soldiers endure him as they endure hunger, damp, and fear. For some, his shadow is a comfort. The trench may swallow men whole, but the commissar ensures it swallows only those who falter. His presence promises that the line will never dissolve into chaos, that the emperor's gaze remains fixed even on this forgotten stretch of mud. For others, his shadow is terror made flesh. To stumble is to die. To doubt is to die. To whisper too loudly of unseen horrors is to die. His shadow is narrower than the trench itself, yet in it men suffocate. Every execution is a sermon. The commissar wastes no words when he draws his pistol, no speeches to justify the act. A soldier flees from the wall during bombardment. The shot cracks, his body collapses, and the lesson is complete. Another trembles when ordered to advance. A single bolt through the skull, and the platoon surges forward without hesitation. The trench learns quickly. Death at the hands of the enemy is inevitable, but death at the hands of the commissar is controllable. One only need obey.
And so obedience becomes a shield, brittle but necessary. Guardsmen force their hands to steady when loading charge packs, even when their fingers bleed. They silence their coughs during roll call, fearing weakness might be mistaken for cowardice. They repeat the litanies with fervor, voices raised louder than their faith warrants. For silence in prayer is as damning as silence in battle. Each act is survival disguised as devotion. The commissar demands not belief, but performance. Still, there are moments when his shadow stretches further than the trench can bear.
One night, a guardsman screamed in his sleep, thrashing against invisible foes. The cry echoed down the line, pulling every man from shallow rest. The commissar arrived within breaths, pistol drawn. He did not ask what the man had seen. He did not ask what dream had shattered his silence. He only raised his weapon and ended the soldier's life, the crack of the bolt louder than the artillery above. No one returned to sleep. The lesson was simple. Even in dreams, there is no escape from duty. The commissar does not fear the hollow earth. At least, he never shows it. When the walls groan and the mud shifts as though something beneath stirs, his boots remain steady. When whispers thread through the fog, his gaze does not waver. Some guardsmen whisper that he does not hear the trench at all, that the emperor shields his ears from its voice. Others claim the opposite, that he hears it more clearly than anyone, and that his silence is proof he has already judged them unworthy of its secrets. Whether truth or rumor, it does not matter. The commissar is not here to understand the hollow earth. He is here to ensure the line does not break before it swallows them. His shadow reminds every guardsman that discipline is not a virtue but a weapon sharper than bayonets, heavier than lasguns, and more final than any shell. Fear is the commissar's true weapon, and it cuts deeper than any bolt shell. It lingers long after the echo of an execution fades, crawling beneath the skin, turning every thought into calculation. A guardsman no longer wonders if he will live through the next bombardment. He wonders if he will live through the next glance of the commissar's eyes. Survival shifts from the battlefield to the shadow, where hesitation is punished faster than any Xenos blade. The trench adjusts itself around this reality. Men learn to hide their doubts behind steady gazes, to mask exhaustion beneath rigid posture. Even the sick force themselves upright when the commissar walks past, their bodies trembling under the strain, because to remain slumped is to invite the pistol. Every motion becomes ritualized, precise, rehearsed, not because of faith, but because of terror. Discipline ceases to be a matter of choice. It becomes instinct, carved into bone by the certainty of judgment. And yet, beneath this enforced obedience, something darker grows. When a comrade falters, when his lasgun drops or his knees buckle, the others do not rush to lift him. They step back instead, widening the gap, ensuring the commissar's gaze falls only on the weak. To save a man is to risk sharing his fate, and so loyalty rots into self-preservation. The trench, once held together by fragile camaraderie, becomes a place of silent betrayal. Men pray together at dawn, but when night falls, each keeps one eye open to see who might be judged next. Still, the commissar does not kill indiscriminately. His executions are chosen carefully, as though each death is a stitch binding the regiment tighter. Too many shots, and morale collapses under the weight of despair. Too few, and discipline frays into chaos. He walks this balance with a precision as cold as the steel of his pistol. The men know this. They whisper that the commissar's mind is like a cogitator, weighing their worth with every breath, calculating exactly how many must die for the rest to march.
There's a paradox in this terror, one that gnaws at every guardsman. They despise him, fear him, curse his name under their breath, yet they cling to his presence like drowning men clutch driftwood. For when the commissar stands among them, cloaked stiff in the wind, it is easier to believe the line might hold. His shadow is cruel, but it is also unbreakable. And in a world where everything else rots, flesh, steel, even faith, the commissar becomes the only constant. Sometimes, in rare moments when the fog lifts and the sky burns red with bombardment, soldiers imagine him not as man, but as extension of the emperor's will, a fragment of the divine carved into human form. His voice becomes liturgy, his pistol a sacrament. To be executed is not punishment, but purification. Such thoughts frighten the men almost as much as the commissar himself, for they know deep down that if they begin to worship him, they will lose what little remains of themselves. But the line between fear and devotion blurs easily in the trenches, and more than one guardsman has died with eyes wide in awe, not terror. The commissar ever falters, never weeps, never allows his mask to slip. If he dreams, no one sees it. If he doubts, no one hears it. The men imagine he has no heart, only a bolt chamber where others keep their humanity. And yet on rare occasions, when he lifts his gaze to the sky as shells streak across it, something passes over his face. Not weakness, not sorrow, but a kind of cold recognition, as if he knows the emperor demands as much of him as of those he executes. Perhaps that is why he survives, while others are consumed, because unlike them, he has already surrendered everything but his purpose. Still, in the quiet between barrages, when the trench groans and whispers stir from the hollow earth below, even the commissar cannot banish silence entirely. His shadow does not reach beneath the mud, and there are things in the dark that no bolt pistol can command. The men know it, and though they would never dare speak it aloud, they sometimes wonder. When the ground itself calls their names, when the hollow earth hums with hunger, will the commissar's bullet save them, or will it only hasten their descent? The commissar's power is not measured in the bodies he leaves behind, but in the silence that follows him. It is a silence heavier than the mud, heavier than the smoke, a silence that presses into every chest until breath itself feels dangerous. When he walks, the trench narrows. When he speaks, the fog recoils. And when his pistol rises, the world stops altogether. This is not war as the guardsmen know it. This is judgment given form, and judgment does not bargain. In this silence, men begin to shape themselves into creatures the commissar will spare. They sharpen their salutes until their arms ache, keep their boots polished, though mud devours them by the hour, scrub their lasguns with such devotion it seems as though they are polishing shrines rather than weapons. Each act is a shield, fragile but vital. For though they cannot fight the hollow earth, cannot resist the corrosion of flesh and steel, they can at least prove themselves loyal beneath the commissar's gaze. Yet loyalty, in this place, is indistinguishable from fear. A guardsman who drags a comrade from the mud does so not out of brotherhood, but to show the commissar his courage. Another who charges into the fog does so not out of faith, but to ensure his hesitation is not mistaken for cowardice. Heroism itself is reshaped, twisted into survival theater. The commissar does not need to speak of the emperor's will. His pistol makes every act liturgy, every step forward a prayer to be spared.
And still, cracks show. A young soldier once muttered under his breath that the commissar had killed more of their own than the enemy. He said it softly, meant it as a bitter joke. But jokes are treason in the commissar's shadow. Within minutes, the boy was dragged to the firing step. His execution was swift, one bolt round tearing him apart before his words could spread. No one laughed again that week. Yet whispers endured, mutating into something stranger. If the commissar takes more lives than the foe, perhaps he is the true enemy they fight. Some dared believe it, but none dared say it aloud. The pistol had silenced their tongues, but not their thoughts. The commissar, of course, knows this. He knows the men curse him silently, dream of his death as often as they dream of their own. He allows it. Hatred is not weakness in his eyes. It is another form of discipline. Better that the men despise him than sink into despair. Better they march in bitter obedience than collapse into apathy. In his shadow, even hatred becomes a weapon of the emperor. One evening, during a lull between bombardments, the commissar stood upon the fire step, cloak snapping in the cold wind. He surveyed the no-man's land, a wasteland of broken tanks and corpses half buried in sludge. The men watched him from below, their eyes reflecting a strange mixture of terror and reverence. For a moment, as artillery fire lit the horizon, he looked like a statue, carved not from stone, but from the same merciless will that had carried the Imperium through 10,000 years of endless war. In that vision, fleeting though it was, the guardsmen felt something stir, not hope, not comfort, but the certainty that their suffering had meaning, however cruel. But when night returned and the trench settled into its uneasy breathing, they remembered the truth. The Commissar cannot hold back the rot forever. He cannot silence the whispers that rise from beneath their boots. His pistol can erase the coward, but it cannot banish the trembling earth or the unseen hunger pressing against the walls. His shadow is vast, but even shadows have edges. Beyond those edges waits the unknown. The Commissar will never admit this. To him there is no beyond, only the Emperor's light and the Emperor's enemies. But the guardsmen know better. They know that when the fog grows too thick, when the ground hums with that deep pulsing rhythm, even the Commissar's bolt pistol sounds small. They obey him because they must, but in the quiet, they cling to one final truth. His shadow is only one of many that stalk the trench, and some shadows cannot be killed with bullets. Still, when the next dawn breaks, gray and ash-stained, the men line the trench with laser guns steady. They chant the litanies louder than they believe them, their voices cracking in the cold. And when the Commissar passes by, pistol at his hip, they salute with trembling hands, each man hoping he looks just loyal enough to survive another day. The shadow lingers long after he is gone, stretching into the fog, merging with the smoke of endless war. And it is in that shadow that the guardsmen learn the final lesson. Fear is not the absence of faith, but its only true proof.
The sky above the trenches is never still. It churns with the weight of endless fire, a ceiling of ash and smoke that has long since buried the memory of stars. Guardsmen lift their eyes only when they must, and even then, the sight is enough to hollow them further. The heavens should inspire, vast, endless, a reminder of the Emperor's dominion stretching across the galaxy. Instead, they are a cage, streaked with fire, rumbling with the echoes of ships unseen. Artillery paints the firmament in colors too violent to be named. Shells streak upward before arcing downward again, their trails carving jagged scars of orange and white through the gray. Sometimes the bombardments last for hours, a continuous thunder that blots out thought, every explosion a drumbeat marking the slow march of despair. Other times, the sky grows unnervingly quiet, its silence pressing on the trench like a hand against a throat. In those pauses, the men huddled tighter, for silence in war is never mercy. It is a warning. Smoke from burning promethium rises without end, coiling into black towers that twist together until the horizon itself vanishes. Through the haze, shapes sometimes appear, the broken silhouettes of ships burning as they fall, their wreckage tearing across the atmosphere like dying stars. The men watch them with hollow fascination, whispering prayers as twisted metal rains down. They do not know if the vessels belong to their allies or their enemies. It does not matter. All ships fall the same way, breaking apart against the hunger of gravity, their crews lost to the ash. Rumors drift downward with the smoke, carried by soldiers who claim to have heard Vox traffic from orbit. Some say that the void above is filled with burning fleets, locked in endless combat, Imperial frigates clashing with heretic warbands, orc hulks lumbering between them like predators in a storm. Others whisper of things stranger still, great engines that stride across the heavens, shapes so vast they blot out entire constellations. The officers dismiss such stories, branding them fever-born delusions,
but the guardsmen cling to them all the same. To imagine something larger than the trench, even if it is monstrous, is to imagine a reason for their suffering. At night, the sky glows faintly, not with stars, but with fire reflected on the clouds. It gives the impression that the world itself is aflame, that the heavens above mirror the inferno below. The guardsmen sleep beneath that glow, their dreams flickering red, their eyelids painted with phantom flame. Some mutter that the sky is not ash at all, but smoke rising from Terra itself, as though the golden throne has burned too brightly and now chokes the galaxy with its light. None believe it openly, of course. To question the Emperor is to invite the Commissar's bullet. Yet the thought lingers, unspoken, poisoning the silence. And then there are the prayers. Every dawn, as shells tear overhead and the sky rumbles like a living beast, the guardsmen raise their voices in ritual. Their words rise with the smoke, carried upward through the ash, a desperate attempt to pierce the storm and reach the Astronomicon. Some believe their voices join the hymns of billions across the Imperium, forming a chorus the Emperor cannot ignore. Others believe the words scatter in the smoke, lost forever before they can rise beyond the atmosphere. Still others whisper that the sky itself devours prayers, feasting on them as hungrily as the hollow earth drinks blood.
It is this uncertainty that gnaws most deeply. The trench can be endured. Hunger, rot, even the Commissar's pistol can be borne with gritted teeth. But the possibility that their suffering rises into nothingness, that their cries die unheard beneath the ashen sky, that is the wound that never heals. And so they pray louder, longer, with cracked voices and bleeding throats, as if sheer volume might force the heavens to listen. When lightning splits the clouds, it feels less like weather and more like an answer. Jagged light claws across the sky, blinding for a heartbeat, and in that instant every man sees something different. Some see the Imperial Aquila blazing, proof of the Emperor's gaze. Others see only the leering faces of their enemies, carved in fire across the heavens. And a few, though they will never admit it aloud, see nothing at all. Only emptiness. Only the void. The ashen sky gives nothing freely. It offers no comfort, no certainty, no promise that beyond its smoke there lies anything but more war. Yet still the guardsmen look upward, if only for a moment, if only to remind themselves that the trench is not the entire galaxy. Above them stretches infinity, indifferent, burning, eternal. And beneath that infinity they remain, small figures in a world of mud, whispering prayers that may never be heard. The sky does more than weigh on the eyes. It seeps into the mind. The longer a guardsman stares into that ceiling of fire and ash, the more he begins to see what cannot be. Some claim the clouds are alive, shifting not with wind but with will. Faces emerging and dissolving, mouths opening in silent screams. Others insist the stars themselves still shine beyond the smoke, visible only to those marked by destiny. To most it is madness, to some it is revelation. And in the trenches there is little difference between the two. It begins with whispers during the lulls. A soldier swears he heard a hymn not sung by mortal voices, echoing faintly through the crackle of static on the vox. Another swears he saw a column of light pierce the clouds, brighter than any shell, descending toward the battlefield before fading into mist. The Commissar dismisses such stories as weakness, and yet the more they are denied, the more they spread. In the silence of night, when the fog presses close and the sky glows faintly red, the rumors breathe louder than prayers. Some say the ashen sky hides the gaze of the Emperor himself, that he looks down upon the trenches, not through the astronomicon, but with his own burning eyes, veiled only by the smoke of a galaxy on fire. These men chant their latinities with greater fervor, convinced each word is heard directly by the golden throne. They imagine their sacrifice measured, weighed, and recorded, a ledger of blood tallied in the emperor's hand. To them, the ash is not a shroud, but a curtain, and beyond it waits eternity in his light.
And there are those who see something else entirely. Visions born of exhaustion, smoke, and madness. They describe titanic shapes moving above the clouds, machines so vast their footfalls shake entire continents, shadows that stretch from horizon to horizon. Some swear they see wings blotting out the heavens, feathers made of fire and ash, as if some vast spirit circles endlessly above the battlefield. No two stories are the same, yet each carries the same trembling awe. Whether angel or monster, the sky holds something greater than them, and that knowledge both terrifies and sustains. The officers call it hallucination. The priests call it revelation. The commissar calls it silence and enforces it with his pistol. But for the guardsmen who live beneath the ashen sky, the distinction does not matter. Reality itself bends in the haze, and faith becomes the only anchor. Whether true or false, seen or imagined, the visions give shape to suffering. And in the Imperium, shape is all that matters. One evening, after a bombardment that lasted 3 days without pause, the sky opened with a sound that was not thunder, but something deeper, as though the world itself had split. The clouds tore apart in jagged lines, revealing not stars, but a darkness so pure it seemed to swallow the light around it. For a heartbeat, the men froze, lasgun slack in their hands. Then the darkness flickered with green fire, searing across the heavens before vanishing into smoke. No one knew its origin. No one dared name it. But in that moment, every guardsman felt the same truth in his bones. The sky itself was not merely backdrop, but battlefield. And so they returned to their rituals, louder, fiercer, desperate. Prayers rose like smoke, shouted against the thunder, demanded rather than begged. For if the sky itself could burn and fracture, then perhaps words could pierce it. Perhaps their voices could force meaning into the chaos. Perhaps, against all reason, someone or something might answer. But the sky gave nothing back. It never does. The ashen sky never sleeps. Even when the guns fall quiet and the trench breathes in uneasy stillness, the heavens remain restless, alive with their own secret violence. The clouds shift like wounded beasts, trembling with hidden thunder, and the men below cannot decide if the sound comforts them or terrifies them. To hear the sky is to know the war continues. To hear nothing at all is worse. Silence is too close to death, too close to the emptiness that may lurk beyond the smoke. Some guardsmen begin to read the sky as scripture. Each streak of fire becomes a verse, each jagged lightning bolt a sermon. They huddle together after bombardments, voices hoarse, interpreting patterns only they can see. A sudden flare is taken as a sign of victory, a rare break in the cloud as the emperor's hand lifting them for a moment. When green fire cuts the heavens, they whisper of heretics or Xenos beyond their sight, casting shadows across worlds they will never see. In these interpretations, meaning is carved from ash, fragile but sustaining.
Others find no scripture, only torment. They dream of falling, endlessly plummeting through smoke, their bodies burning as ships do when they break against atmosphere.
They wake gasping, their mouths filled with the taste of cinders, the sound of shrieking metal still ringing in their ears. To them, the sky is not holy, not mysterious, but a promise that everything, no matter how strong, will eventually fall. These men grow quieter with each dawn, their eyes fixed upward as if waiting their turn to descend. It is in this split, between those who see revelation and those who see ruin, that the sky exerts its greatest power. It divides men more thoroughly than hunger, more insidiously than the commissar's pistol. Faith against despair, scripture against silence, prayer against doubt. And yet, even in division, the guardsmen remain bound by the same truth. The sky cannot be ignored. It presses into every breath, every thought, every dream. It is both cage and horizon, eternal reminder and eternal threat. The chaplains speak of it with fire in their voices, their words soaring above the crash of shells. They declare the ash to be the emperor's veil, drawn to protect mortal eyes from the full brilliance of his light. They point upward with cracked fingers, commanding the guardsmen to believe that beyond the smoke Terra shines untouched, the Astronomicon burning brighter than ever. Their sermons are as loud as the guns, their certainty as sharp as bayonets. And for a moment, the men believe. They lift their voices in chorus, drowning out doubt, demanding the heavens' answer. But when the prayers fade, when the chaplains fall silent, the ash remains unchanged. The sky neither parts nor brightens. It remains gray, restless, eternal. And in that unyielding indifference, doubt creeps back into the cracks. It is then that rumors turn darker. Soldiers whisper that the sky feeds upon their voices, that every prayer becomes fuel for the storm. Some claim the ash itself is made not of smoke, but of souls, billions of them, burned in wars across 1,000 worlds, drifting endlessly above. To look too long is to risk seeing one's own face in the clouds, screaming silently as it dissolves into cinders. Such stories spread faster than any sermon, for they are whispered in fear, and fear has sharper wings than faith. One night, after a day when the bombardments never ceased and the air itself seemed aflame, the trench fell into unnatural quiet. No shells, no lightning, only the faint hiss of drifting smoke. The guardsmen lay awake, staring upward, and for a heartbeat they all felt it. The weight of the sky pressing down, suffocating, as though it were not air above them but stone. In that suffocating moment, even the commissar's presence meant nothing. The men felt small, crushed beneath a ceiling of ash that might collapse at any moment. Some prayed, some wept. A few simply closed their eyes and waited for the crushing silence to finish its work. The sky did not fall. It never does. But its weight remained, heavier for having revealed its hand. And from that night forward, the guardsmen no longer spoke of the sky as weather or even as a battlefield. They spoke of it as a force, patient, hungry, eternal, no different than the hollow earth beneath their boots. They were trapped between two hungers, one that drank their blood and one that devoured their prayers.
And so the trench became more than mud and steel. It became a crucible caught between earth and sky, a place where men learned that survival was not only a matter of holding the line, but of enduring the weight of infinities pressing down from above and pulling up from below. Between them stretched only a sliver of life, fragile and fleeting, where a guardsman could breathe for one more hour, one more day, one more battle. Above, the ashen sky trembled, below the hollow earth whispered, and in that narrow space between the guardsmen endured, waiting for the silence to break. Dreams are the only escape left to a guardsman, yet even there the war follows. Sleep, when it comes, drags them into visions more suffocating than waking life. Some dream of endless marching, their boots sinking deeper with every step until the mud rises to their throats. Others see the sky crack open, not with shells, but with a light too bright to endure, searing their eyes until nothing remains but afterimage. And then there are dreams no one dares describe, where voices speak from places beyond language, whispering truths that leave men shaking when they wake. It is said, quietly, always quietly, that such dreams are not accidents of the mind, but messages carried on currents beyond sight. Some call them blessings, others curses. A few whisper that they are the Astronomicon itself, refracted through the storm, the Emperor's will breaking apart like light through smoke. The priests nod gravely when such words are spoken, declaring the visions holy. The commissar, when he hears of them, silences the speaker with his pistol. Both responses, in their way, confirm the same truth. No one can be certain where dreams end and prophecy begins. The rumors spread in the half-light, passed between soldiers who huddled together for warmth. They say the trenches are not only graves, but conduits, that the blood spilled into the hollow earth carries prayers downward, as even smoke carries them upward. That between earth and sky the Astronomicon flickers, struggling to pierce the veil, and so messages slip in broken fragments into the minds of the desperate. A man dreams of his mother's voice, but it speaks in tongues he does not know. Another dreams of the Emperor, but his face is veiled, his mouth unmoving. Still another dreams of marching endlessly toward a golden light that retreats further with every step. Whether these visions are real or madness, they take root. Soldiers wake shaking, clutching at their aquillas as though holding them tighter might force clarity. Some refuse to sleep at all, fearful of what waits beyond their eyelids. Others seek sleep eagerly, eager to taste again the fragments of eternity, even if they burn. In the trench, dreams become a new battlefield, when the commissar cannot patrol and no lasgun can defend. There is a story, whispered so often it has become litany, of a guardsman who claimed he heard not the Emperor, but the voices of those already devoured by the hollow earth. He said they called to him in sleep, not with malice, but with pleading, begging him to join them, to give himself willingly so their chorus might grow stronger. He repeated this story for 3 nights before his body was found slumped against the trench wall, eyes wide, mouth filled with mud. No one spoke of him again, but his tale lived on, whispered whenever the sky burned brighter than usual.
And then there are the other whispers, the ones that come not in dreams, but in waking silence, when the guns fall quiet and the trench holds its breath. Men claim to hear voices on the edge of sound, carried through the static of broken Vox units, murmurs threading beneath the wind. Some believe these are echoes of distant commands, garbled by distance. Others insist they are prayers bleeding back from the Astronomicon, fragments of a galaxy's worth of voices colliding in the storm. But the most fearful whisper that they are neither, that the voices are something else entirely, listening from beyond, waiting for belief strong enough to draw them closer. The commissar calls such talk sedition. The chaplains call it revelation. The men themselves know only that the whispers never cease. Whether in dream or silence, prayer or hallucination, something stirs beyond the veil. Something listens, and whether it is emperor, enemy, or emptiness, they cannot tell. In this uncertainty lies the deepest horror. Mud, hunger, steel, fear, these can be endured, for they are tangible, survivable. But to feel one's prayers dissolve into the unknown, to sense the universe bending close yet offering no certainty, that is the weight that hollows men faster than the trench ever could. They keep praying because they must. They keep whispering because silence is worse. And in the dark between earth and sky, where the Astronomicon's light flickers unseen, they wonder if perhaps the whispers are not beyond at all, but already within them. The whispers grow strongest in the hours before dawn, when the sky dims to a bruise-colored haze, and even the guns fall into uneasy silence. The men call this hour the hollow watch, for it feels as though the galaxy itself pauses, listening. In that stillness, voices thread through the fog, faint, uneven, like breath pressed against the ear. Some hear prayers in familiar tongues, others hear words so alien they cannot be repeated. A few hear only their own names, spoken softly from nowhere. At first, the guardsmen tried to banish the voices with hymns. They raised their chants louder, drowning the whispers beneath the weight of litany. But the voices did not retreat. They lingered, sliding between syllables, weaving themselves into the cadence of the prayers until the two became indistinguishable. A soldier might cry out the emperor's name and swear he heard another voice answer, hidden within his own breath. The chaplains declared this proof of divine presence. The commissar said nothing, but his pistol remained close at hand. The more the whispers wove themselves into the rhythm of war, the more the men began to change. They spoke less to one another, saving their words for the unseen ears beyond the veil. They grew careless with secrecy, muttering aloud to no one in particular, as if carried in conversation with an invisible companion. One guardsman was found kneeling in the mud, head bowed, whispering continuously for 3 days without food or rest. When finally pulled away, his voice had worn down to a rasp, but his lips still moved, silently shaping words long after sound had fled. He died the following night, a faint smile fixed on his face, as though he had joined a dialogue too vast to leave. Others resisted, clinging fiercely to ritual discipline. They recited only sanctioned prayers, never improvising, never pausing, never listening. Yet even they could not shut the whispers out entirely. Sometimes, mid-litany, their voices faltered, eyes going wide as though they had heard something folded into their own chant. They would fall silent afterward, trembling, clutching equilas to their chests until their knuckles whitened. Faith became armor, but even armor cracks when pressed long enough.
The most unnerving were those who welcomed the voices. These men began to act with unnerving calm. Their fear burned away as if replaced by certainty. They charged into no man's land with serene smiles, lasguns raised, uncaring of shells or fire. When asked what drove them, they answered only that they had been called. Some returned from these suicidal forays, half burned, half buried, yet still murmuring under their breath. Others did not return at all, and their absence was explained as the emperor's choosing. Whether this was faith or madness, no one dared decide. Among the guardsmen, divisions grew. Some clung to the belief that the whispers were fragments of the Astronomicon, proof that the emperor's light pierced even this ashen world. Others were certain the voices belonged to something else, something that fed on prayers rather than answered them. Still others believed the whispers were their own souls, stripped bare by suffering, echoing back at them from the void. No consensus could be reached, yet all agreed on one point: the whispers were real. Denial was impossible when so many had heard them. The commissar treated the matter with his usual cold precision. When whispers led a man too far, when he began to speak of abandonment or to claim the emperor had turned his face away, the bolt pistol ended his tongue. But the commissar could not shoot every whisper, for they were too many, and they came even from men who still obeyed. So he walked the line with his pistol holstered, but his shadow heavy, reminding them that whether the voices came from the emperor or from the abyss, their duty did not change. They would fight, they would endure, they would die in his name. Yet even the commissar could not silence what came next. For in the hollow watch, when the whispers swelled, some guardsmen swore the very air shifted, vibrating like a plucked string. The trench walls trembled, not with shells, but with resonance, as if the entire battlefield had become an instrument played by unseen hands. In those moments the men pressed their ears to the mud, to lasguns, even to each other's chests, desperate to hear more clearly. They did not question what force could shake the world this way, they only listened,
wide-eyed, as though eternity itself were leaning close to speak. And always the words dissolved before meaning could be grasped. Always the message slipped away, leaving only silence. Yet silence now was the most unbearable sound of all. There comes a point when whispers no longer feel external. They coil inside the skull, indistinguishable from thought, threading themselves into the rhythm of memory until a guardsman cannot tell whether he recalls his mother's voice or something else entirely. Men begin to question the boundaries of their own minds. When they mutter litanies, is it their lips moving, or are they only repeating words already spoken within them? When they hear their name in the dark, is it their comrade calling, or is it their own soul echoing back from a distance too vast to measure? For some, this erosion of certainty brings collapse. They dig their nails into their ears, desperate to claw silence back, only to find that the whispers are louder within than without. They fall into raving, tearing at themselves, until the commissar delivers the inevitable bullet. Their deaths are swift, but their screams linger, reverberating like echoes long after the pistol falls quiet.
For others, the erosion births a terrible calm. They cease to resist, ceasing even to distinguish between voice and silence. They march with serenity into firestorms, smiling as though guided by unseen hands. They fight with a strength not born of training but of conviction, striking blows that seem impossibly precise, as though the whispers themselves have taken the role of command. The commissar does not commend them, nor does he execute them. He simply watches, perhaps unwilling to admit that fear and discipline are not the only chains binding his regiment together. The chaplains preach louder, desperate to reclaim dominion over the unseen. They insist the voices are fragments of the Astronomicon, shards of the Emperor's beacon breaking through the storm. They tell the men they are chosen, that their suffering has opened them to truths hidden from others. The guardsmen nod, but their eyes wander skyward, to the ash that never clears, to the thunder that never ceases. If these are the Emperor's words, why do they come clothed in terror? If this is his will, why does it sound so much like hunger? One night, after a bombardment so fierce it left the trench walls quaking like flesh, the whispers rose in unison. Every guardsman heard them, even those who had resisted longest. For a breathless span of minutes, the trench itself vibrated with resonance, a chorus without tongue or throat. Some fell to their knees, convinced it was revelation. Others clutched their lasguns in white-knuckled terror, certain it was damnation. The commissar stood motionless, cloak torn by the wind, bolt pistol lowered. For the first and only time, he too seemed to listen. Then the chorus fractured, splintering into countless murmurs again, each soldier hearing something different. One man claimed he was promised deliverance, another swore he was cursed, another wept openly, insisting he had heard the Emperor himself, though he could not recall the words. The trench dissolved into chaos, not of fear, but of conviction. Every man certain, every man divided, every man possessed by his own truth.
When dawn broke, the sky gave no sign. The ash hung heavy, the guns resumed, the mud swallowed the first bodies of the day. Life in the trench continued as though nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. From that morning onward, each guardsman carried within him a secret certainty of salvation, of damnation, of revelation, of emptiness. They fought no longer for survival, nor for duty, but for the meanings they had heard, whether real or imagined. The war, of course, did not end. Battles raged, bodies fell, shells screamed across the horizon. But beneath it all, the whispers remained, subtle as breath, patient as time. They did not need to shout anymore. They had already taken root.
Perhaps they were fragments of the Astronomicon, scattered through storm and ash. Perhaps they were the echo of the hollow earth, rising to claim what the mud could not. Perhaps they were nothing at all, only the minds of dying men collapsing under the weight of eternity. None could say, none would ever know, but the guardsmen believed. And in a galaxy where belief itself shapes reality, that was enough. Above them, the ashen sky trembled. Beneath them, the hollow earth whispered. And between the two, trapped, trembling, unbroken, the Imperium soldiers endured. Their prayers and screams indistinguishable, their faith and madness the same.